Spirit Untamed. Hey, remember that horse movie DreamWorks did about 2 decades ago? You know, back when they were still making hand-drawn films and the horse was running around like
Matt Damon.
Honestly, that was a surprisingly good film. Not only is the animation great, but it also has a strong story about a horse trying to go back to where he belongs in a human-dominated world, all told in a very down-to-earth and realistic manner that effectively takes itself seriously. Well, several years later, and the horse finally came back to the big screen. Actually, not really, technically, but, well, okay, here's the thing. This new Spirit movie is not really a sequel to Stallion of the Cimarron. This is actually a spin-off feature to the series that DreamWorks made for Netflix called Spirit Riding Free. Now, before I jump into this movie, I just want to clarify that I have not seen any episodes of Spirit Riding Free. All I know is that this is one of DreamWorks' most successful shows they've made on Netflix. It's kind of related to the 2002 film, and that's about it. Yes, I did do a bit of research to have the most basic idea of the series, but in a way, I'll be coming into this as a newcomer to the Riding Free lore. So now that we'll be saddling up with another DreamWorks horse, will this movie make its audience feel like they're riding free? Or will I end up going untamed on this picture? Let's find out. The story. Even if it's not directly linked to the 2002 film, there must be some connections to the last Spirit film to give those fans some familiarity about the life of a wild horse, right? No. The first thing I recommend now is for you to forget all that you know about Stallion of the Cimarron because, like its main characters, it refuses to follow the rules and wants to go on its own path. However, the path that it wants to go for this feature is a rather uneventful one. If there is a DreamWorks movie that is comparable, it would actually be How to Train Your Dragon, considering how the film's heart is about the bond of the leading little girl and the wild horse who only trusts her.
I'm better with you.
It follows the similar steps of Lucky repeatedly trying to get Spirit's trust, and lead to the big mission of rescuing his herd. But the big difference between Spirit and Dragon is that this movie lacks any of the creativity and excitement that made Dragon one of DreamWorks' most memorable pictures. Everything else for this film is replaced with just a bunch of bland elements and tiresome tropes that end up making the experience rather boring. And a part of its dreary tone is from the film's predictability, keeping the plot straightforward of highlighting Lucky's bond with Spirit while trying to fit in her new environment and then stopping the bad guys to save the horse herd. Just by hearing that synopsis, I can say now that what you'd expect that could be the outcome of this journey is almost guaranteed to happen here without any extra spices in between to make things interesting or to get engaged with Lucky's adventure. Now, this is not to say that the story isn't trying. It's not purposely being lazy to get through the production quicker. I'll give it that while I personally wasn't invested with what's going on, I can see where things can be exciting. For the right audience, this can actually get intense, especially in the third act when the girls go out to rescue the horses and have to travel some dangerous paths to achieve their mission. I'll give it credit that when danger happens, it does have a good pace to keep things really gripping to the point of almost being a matter of life and death. But again, that's only for the right audience who would get invested in the characters. Without it, it's just a bunch of action scenes that's hard to be engrossed in because we know what the outcome will be. The important thing to remember is that this movie has 2 things: horses and little girls riding horses. Don't expect the story to show anything more than that. The animation. One thing that is immediately apparent going from the series to the movie is how the film changed the style of its animation. While Riding Free has this cel-shaded look to highlight its colors, Untamed is a lot more straightforward as a computer-animated film with more use of textures, effects, and lighting. It's honestly a weird transition because it's almost like the movie is trying to fix what isn't broken. The reason why I say that is because it's noticeable that this is one of DreamWorks' less expensive movies to make, since it has a very modest budget of $30 million. Of course, having a smaller budget doesn't mean it makes the movie bad. Case in point, look at Captain Underpants. But it is apparent when most of the places can feel empty. And when I say empty, I mean that the environments can have an unnatural amount of open spaces to the point of feeling like the wilderness is abandoned and Lucky moved into a ghost town.
Still know that it's true. I'm better with you.
Doesn't help either that the place is just this bland western town that doesn't even have any of the interesting parts, like no saloons where the tough guys could get a drink, or no tumbleweeds passing by to set the mood of a shootout. There could have been plenty more to add in to give the backgrounds full of life, but it just doesn't have the budget to do so, and instead of working with what it can have, it sets up this big plan with little to fill it with. And then there's the most problematic aspect: the character designs. Again, this is another noticeable change from the show, and there's just something about it that kind of feels off, especially when there are some contrasting styles happening at the same time. You got the horses that are fine, and they stay true to the style of the 2002 movie, but then the humans went with a more quirky and cartoony style that seems to fit more in something like The Boss Baby. And this is not even the kind of movie that's primarily trying to be funny. And with the low budget that it had to work with, it honestly made me wonder, why couldn't they have stayed true to the style of the series? You know, keep the same designs and the cel-shaded look, but elevate it a little to give it that feature quality polish. That way, it would have been unapologetically a spirit writing free movie while capable of making the most out of its resource. But this is not to say that the animation is awful. Flawed for sure, but this is not a bad job here. With what the animators have done, they look pretty good and it is well rendered, not to mention making the action scenes as effective as they can possibly be. What I do admire the most in the film is with the character animation. Yes, the humans are more down to earth and rely more on subtle movements to express themselves. But the horse animation, like from the 2002 movie, is top notch and managed to get a lot of emotions out of the horses like Spirit without having him talk.
Alright, so that's how it's gonna be. Let's try this again.
I think it's safe to say that this is not great animation, since it can, both figuratively and literally, have a lot of room for improvement, but would I call this bad animation? Definitely not. The characters. As this is a movie about the bond of a girl and her horse, this is expectedly a more character-driven movie, where the appeal comes from getting emotionally invested with the leads on their adventure. I don't know about you, but there's a major problem there because I did not care about anyone here at all. The problem with the characters is that they're all unoriginal tropes that have already been done before countless of times while given nothing new to make them stand out or have them be memorable in any way. Of course, it's not just the horse who is untamed, but also its protagonist, Lucky, who is the free spirit that can never follow the rules and often finds herself in trouble. However, she does have a good heart and is very similar to her mom, where she has a strong passion for horses and for the well-being of those she cares about. And with an attitude like that, she is the perfect person to bond with a wild Mustang-like Spirit, who is very resentful against humans due to the treatment he's often been given by the villains. And by the way, no, he doesn't have any inner monologue where he goes around like, "Hello, I am horse, and I am untamed." But by her side, she has her two new human friends, Prue, the more doubtfully cautious one that still tags along anyways, and Abigail, the more outgoing comic relief that supplies a good portion of the movie's humor.
I just rode a horse. I almost died, but I just rode a horse.
Around here, we call that hanging on for dear life.
Hey, but it's a start.
Outside of them, there are the already mentioned villains that are just that, a bunch of villainous horse wranglers, Cora, who is the aunt that has a hard time fitting in with the country life, and Jim, Lucky's father, who finally gets to reunite with her after several years and does not want her to go near horses because of the death of her mother from an incident during a horse show. And by the way, yes, since this is already so dependent on cliches, why not include that old animation tradition of killing off the mother? Because you can't have an animated feature without the mom having a low survival rate. At best, I can't say that there are any characters that got me frustrated or anything like that. They're just too plain and unoriginal for me to care. Give me about a week and I'll quickly forget who any of these characters are. For a movie that has Untamed in the title, it sure does have a problem of being a little too tame. Spirit Untamed is just a watered-down How to Train Your Dragon that replaced anything that can be memorable and original with horses. I can't say that it's the worst thing I've seen, especially when the animation does try to look good and include action scenes to put in some effort to make things interesting. But with such a predictably boring story, still characters, and even the animation can be weird by reinventing the series style, the best I can call this movie is harmless. Nothing to cringe or get angry over, but there's nothing I could really praise about or has anything that wasn't already done in another feature. If you want to consider watching this movie, then that would depend on how interested you are in the Netflix series. Do you want to watch little girls riding horses, mostly talk about horses, and going on little adventures with horses? If you don't think that's your thing, then this movie is not for you. I can imagine horse lovers enjoying this film, but don't come in expecting Stallion of the Cimarron. This is a movie with just horses and little girls. What else did you expect?
Hoy el viento canta, mira el águila volar. All right, so that's how it's gonna be.